I mean, all things that we wanted to do, because then everything else is going to be coming down. We want it to come down. We want bacon to come down, and groceries, a term I used to use. It's sort of an old-fashioned term, but I used to use it on the campaign trail. Those last 90 perfect, beautiful days, we just hit it. And I want to thank Susie. You have done a great job, Susie Wiles. Great job, Susie. A big magazine just named her the most powerful woman in the world, and that's okay with me. She is the most powerful woman. You think about it, John, right? The most powerful woman in the world, but she's great. And we had a great 90 days. It was a perfect 90 days, and it was a great result, but we want to put that result to good use by doing a phenomenal job. And I want to tell you that Todd and Emil know this very well. We had an amazing judge in Florida, and her name is Eileen Cannon, and I didn't know her. I still don't know her. I don't believe I ever spoke to her, even during the trial, but I did appoint her, federal judge, and these fake lawyers, these horrible human beings, were hitting her so hard, public relations-wise. They were playing the ref. I don't think it's legal. I don't think it's legal. They might as well go out and just shout it in a courthouse. They were saying she was slow, she wasn't smart, she was totally biased, she loved Trump. I didn't know her, other than I saw her the couple of days that I was in court, and I thought her decorum was amazing. Anything bad they could say, though, they were saying about her, it was whatever they could say bad about a human being, all made up. Because actually she was brilliant, she moved quickly. She was the absolute model of what a judge should be. And she was strong and tough. And how do you get them to stop if you're a judge? How do you get them to stop with the playing the ref? Bobby Knight would play the ref. That's why I brought up the Bobby Knight story. He would play the ref. He'd scream at the ref. He'd scream so hard. Oh, boy, it was terrible, actually. And the people would come up, his assistant coaches would come up to play. Coach, don't do that. Don't do it. He said he's not going to change his tune, Coach. He called it. He's not changing. I don't care. And he's screaming. That's when he threw the chair. He starts going crazy. And he said, no, he's not going to change this time, but he's going to change for the next play. And sure as hell he did. You know, Bobby, by the way, had the last undefeated team in basketball. And relatively speaking, you know, he had that team. He always had a team. He never had that. Well, he had a couple of great players, obviously, some top NBA players, but very few relatively. He had a team, but he won the national championship 3 times, but he had the last undefeated team in basketball. And he would play the ref, and he would scream at him. He knew exactly what he was doing. They're doing the same thing. He said, no, he's not going to change now, but he's going to change for the next one. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to scare the hell. They wanted to scare the hell out of the judges, and they do it. And how do you stop it if you're a judge? Because you want to go home, you have a family, you have children, and the New York Times will write whatever these people say, and the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal, and MSDNC, and the fake news CNN, and ABC, and CBS, and NBC, and they'll write whatever they say. And what do you do to get rid of it? You convict Trump. All you have to do is be really tough on him and ultimately convict him, and they leave you alone. It's totally illegal what they do. I just hope you can all watch for it, but it's totally illegal. And it was so unfair what they were doing to her. But they do it all the time with judges. But in her case, she was very courageous, and it only made her angry. Wouldn't you say? It just made her angry. She didn't like it. A lot of them say, oh, please don't say that about me. My family, what's my husband going to say? What's my wife going to say, or my kids? Please don't say that. And it had absolutely no impact on her in the case against me, which was a case, I will not use a bad word. I promised my wife I would never use a bad word, so just a little bad. The case against me was bullshit. And she correctly dismissed it. She correctly. Look at Emil, he's looking, he said, that's interesting. But these two guys were warriors. You got a warrior here. You got two warriors, I can tell you that. You got a whole bunch of them. But, and they wouldn't quit. They wouldn't take no for an answer. They just wouldn't quit. These two people right up here, and some others that are involved with it indirectly. And what the lawyers do is they're doing it to the Supreme Court justices, hoping that they'll be overcome by the horrible things they say about them. They say things about Supreme Court justices and judges that are just horrible. They're playing the ref. Remember the way they treated Justice Thomas and Justice Alito and Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Gorsuch. Chief Justice Roberts get treated unbelievably badly, and they're hoping that they can sway them to go along because, again, what do? They're humans. You know, like it would be wonderful if everybody was just a perfect computer machine, but they're not. They're humans, and they don't want to be accused of many, many things, including gross incompetence. They don't like it, and they don't want it. There's not much they can do about it. You know, they're in a position they can't really fight back really very well. And so what they do is sometimes they get weak. I would say a majority, maybe, of the times. That's why I'm so impressed with Judge Cannon in Florida, how strong she was, how she held up. It actually made her more resolute than anything I've seen. I mean, it was amazing because they were hitting her so hard. It was so sad to watch this. But it's sad what they do to other judges. It's very sad what they do to the Supreme Court. And a lot of the judges that I had, if you look at them, they take tremendous abuse in the New York Times and the Washington Post, all of the different networks. They take such abuse. And honestly, very simply, they're afraid of bad publicity. They don't want bad publicity. And it's truly interference, in my opinion, and it should be illegal, and it probably is illegal in some form. There's no difference than speaking to a judge or shouting to a judge or doing whatever you have to do in a courthouse. They're doing it behind the back. They're usually doing it anonymously. They're saying anonymously, off the record, the judge is no good, but everybody knows where it's coming from. And it's totally coordinated. It's a campaign, and it's by the same scum that you have been dealing with for years, like guys like Andrew Weissman, deranged Jack Smith. There's a guy named Norm Eisen. I don't even know what he looks like. His name is Norm Eisen of Crew. He's been after me for 9 years. Now, Crew is a charitable organization. And the reason I'm saying this, Todd, is I'm only going to get one chance to say this. But these are bad people. I don't know who he is. I don't know what he looks like. But everything I read is Norm Eisen of Crew. And Crew is a charitable organization. And that's a political thing. His sole life is to get Donald Trump. And he's been vicious and violent. And he's trying, and he probably had pretty good success over the years. But with me, how did he do? I think I'm president. Am I here because I'm president? But we had to take all of that abuse. Even during the trials, we had to take tremendous abuse. Like, you know, these wonderful guys, they're not legitimate people. They're horrible people. They're scum. And you have to know that. And you're going to have these cases where you can't allow yourselves to be deflected. You just can't let it happen. You have such a higher calling. And I believe that CNN and MSDNC, who literally write 97.6% bad about me, are political arms of the Democrat Party. And in my opinion, they're really corrupt and they're illegal. What they do is illegal. It makes no difference how big a victory I had. I can have the biggest victory in history. It makes no difference what kind of a failure the other side has. These people are going to go after me. And I said it during the other night, during the big speech on Tuesday night. I said about Democrats, and I don't like that. I have great respect, by the way, for what Schumer did today. He went out and he said that I'm going to have to vote with the Republicans because it's the right thing to do. I couldn't believe what I heard. But, you know, I think he's going to get some credit for it. I think, let's see what happens tonight with the big vote as it comes. But these networks and these newspapers are really no different than a highly paid political operative. And it has to stop. It has to be illegal. It's influencing judges, and it's really changing law. And it just cannot be legal. I don't believe it's legal. And they do it in total coordination with each other. And everything we do, we're restoring law, restoring order, and restoring public safety in America. That's what we want to do. And we're bringing honor and integrity and accountability back to the highest levels of the FBI, DOJ, and throughout our government. We're bringing our country back faster than anyone ever thought possible. We're working so hard at doing it, and we want fairness in the courts. The courts are a big factor. The elections, which were totally rigged, are a big factor. We have to have honest elections. We have to have borders, and we have to have courts and law that's fair. Well, we're not going to have a country. Crooked Joe Biden got us into a real mess with Russia and everything else he did, frankly, but he didn't know about it, and he, generally speaking, signed it with auto pen. So how would he know? That auto pen is a big deal. I don't know. You know, they're having, who's doing this? So when my people come up, Will and all of the people, Steve, they come up and, sir, this is an executive order. They explain it to me, and, you know, 90% of the time I sign it. 99% of the time I say do it. But they come up and I sign it. But you don't use auto pen. It's number one, it's disrespectful to the office. Number two, maybe it's not even valid because, you know, who's getting him to sign? He had no idea what the hell he was doing. If he did, all of these bad things wouldn't be happening right now. But we're going to get you back into a great position, and we've already started. They say that we had the most successful first month of presidency. Not a long time, but it's still a lot. It's like if you're a golfer, sinking a 3-foot putt on the first hole gives you confidence to sink something on the second hole. But if you miss that first putt, you don't like to have the putt on the second hole and the third hole. It could be a very bad experience. It's nice to get that first month, and now we have more than a month. Now we have a month and a half, and it's going really, really well. I can tell you as a little secret, although the cameras are blazing back there, so it's not that much. But I think we're doing well, as you have been hearing about Ukraine. I think we're doing now well with Russia. We're speaking with President Putin. We want to get the war over. Not only have we spent maybe $350 billion to Europe's, think of that, $350 billion to $100 billion, and yet we're across the ocean far away, so it shouldn't have been that way, but Biden let that happen too. And we're getting a deal where we're going to get that back, but much more importantly are the lives that we're talking about. On average, 2,000 young people are being killed every single day. Now, they're not from here. They're from nowhere close to here, but they're young people. They're human beings, and they have parents. They have sisters and brothers, the mothers and fathers, the friends and the families and the towns where they grew up. And they're losing, on average, 2,000, even 2,500 a week. And I want to get it stopped. And we've had some very good calls today with Russia and with Ukraine. They've agreed for a ceasefire if we can get it with Russia. And it's not easy. It's a tough one. But I think we're doing it. And as the Secretary General said yesterday of NATO, a terrific guy, he said without Trump, we wouldn't be talking about it. It would just go on for years, and millions more people, millions of people have been killed, but millions more people would be killed. And he said it was a great honor. Without me, it would just keep going on. We're looking for the ceasefire now with Russia, and we've had some very good talks about it. We've had some very good responses. And I can tell you that there was a case where there would have been no war if I were president, and it's just 100% would not have happened, would never have happened. I used to speak to President Putin a lot about it. I said, don't do it. Don't do it. I won't tell you what the consequence was. I won't tell you what he's, but if he believed even 5% of what I said, then he would say, I'm not going to do it. And I think he did. But we had a good relationship, and we had a professional relationship, and his respect for this country. And I think we've had some very good results. So, you know, I haven't been able to say that to anybody else. I haven't wanted to say it until just before I came here. I got some pretty good news. So, but we have to see what happens. It's still a long way to go. The fighting is unbelievable. Russia has a large group of Ukrainian soldiers, as we speak, surrounded and in grave danger. They've been able to surround them. They're in grave danger. Biden should have never let this war happen. First of all, you don't want to pick on somebody that's a lot larger than you, even with the money. There's a lot of money that we gave them and a lot of equipment. We make the best military equipment in the world, but even with all of that, it's unbelievable. Right now, you have a lot of Ukrainian soldiers that are encircled and in grave danger, and I've asked them not to kill those soldiers, please, not to kill those soldiers. We don't want them killed. It's such a shame to see what's happened. A thing like that would have never happened. Inflation would have never happened. October 7th would have never happened. Israel, Iran had no money. They were totally broke. Think of it. They had no money to give to anybody. They were totally broke. And within a short period of time, as soon as Biden came in, he took out all the sanctions. In China and everybody else that wasn't buying oil from Iran was buying it at levels that they never spent before. And it was a sad thing. And if you look at Afghanistan, that was probably what got Putin started, because when he looked at how horribly we looked, I think the most embarrassing day, not that we got out because we were getting out, I would have been out faster than them. I was the one that got it down to the right level. But we would have kept Bagram, the big Air Force base. We would have kept it. Right now, China occupies Bagram. And the reason we would have kept it is because they were 1 hour away from where China has and builds its nuclear missiles and weapons. And they gave that up. At the dark of night, they left the lights on, and they left the dogs behind, by the way. A lot of people say, what about all the dogs? They had a lot of dogs, and they left the dogs behind. And what a shame, what a shame. The way we got out, I think it was the most humiliating time in the history of our country. The way it happened, not that we were getting out, because we wanted to get out, but we would have gotten out with dignity and strength. And what a difference a rigged and crooked election had on our country when you think about it. And the people who did this to us should go to jail. They should go to jail. So I just want to say God bless America, because we have to say God bless. We're lucky we're still here, frankly. And this whole thing could lead, I think we have it. I think we have it. But this could lead to World War III. Very easily, could very easily lead to World War III, but I think we're in pretty good shape, a lot better than we were before we got involved, that I can tell you. That was heading into World War III territory, and that would have been a war like no other because of nuclear weapons and other types of weapons that, hey, people you don't even want to know about. But it's
We're just going to pull away from that address by President Trump at the Department of Justice, which he renamed as the Department of Injustice. Donald Trump there making a wide-ranging speech, taking in a number of topics. He laterally there addressed the war in Ukraine, where he repeated that he's had some very promising talks with Vladimir Putin. He's cautiously optimistic that a deal can be done, repeating that he has asked Vladimir Putin to spare the lives of Ukrainian soldiers who he says are surrounded in Kursk, although that has been contradicted by the Ukrainian military. He also repeated his incorrect assertion that the US has spent $350 billion on the war in Ukraine. That is not exactly true. And he also went after some of the people in the Department of Justice who targeted him before he became president. Again, remember, Donald Trump was twice impeached and at one stage was facing a series of criminal trials, criminal allegations. But Donald Trump there covering a lot of ground. You're going to get plenty more reaction to that very shortly with State of the Nation. Here's Matt Goodwin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, right here on GB News. Now, we've just been listening to Donald Trump at the US Justice Department speaking about everything from the legal warfare against his presidency to the Ukraine peace talks. Now, for reaction, joining me now is Democratic Party strategist and commentator Nomiki Konst. Nomiki, what's your initial reaction to what you're hearing from Donald Trump today, including some of these sweeping assertions about the Democrats actively working to essentially undermine his quest for the presidency, and then second, his sweeping reforms of the areas of justice and home affairs?
I think that Donald Trump understands that the American people right now who are being polled across the board, including people who voted for Donald Trump, are very worried about the economy, are very worried about the institutions of the United States holding together, and of course, global affairs. And Donald Trump is just trying to distract everybody. He's still in campaign land. He's still talking about Joe Biden. He's still talking about his 2 impeachments. He's still talking about, revenge against the DOJ, who rightfully so went to Mar-a-Lago in Florida to retain the documents that he illegally stole from the presidency after he left office. That's a national security risk, and that's why they went in. But he felt that that was an assault on him personally, and he won't stop talking about it and distracting away from what's really happening, which is DOJ, in an unelected agency, or whatever you want to call it. It's not an official government agency. And Elon Musk, somebody who is not elected and did not go before Congress when asked to present himself, this entity, this shadow government, is basically trying to tear apart our Constitution and the rights of American citizens and dismantle any institutions that either Donald Trump doesn't like or, frankly, our foreign adversaries would find very convenient to dismantle. So
Sorry, Nomiki, we'll be getting some other reaction in the studio shortly just about some of those suggestions. But what do you make about Donald Trump's specific assertion again today that he can end the Ukraine war, that we're on the cusp of a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia, that if it weren't for him, if we were still under Joe Biden, this would never be happening. Millions of young people would be losing their lives. America would still be paying hundreds of billions of dollars. What do you make about that assertion?
I think that Donald Trump is going to do whatever he can, but it's on whose terms? Is it on Donald Trump's terms? Is it on some broader coalition's terms, or is it on Vladimir Putin's terms? I think, there's no question at this point from any of our allies, whether in the EU or in the UK or across the globe, that whatever Joe Biden's accomplishments were, he at least had the intentions of a democratic world order. He was not afraid to take on Putin and pressure Putin, whereas Donald Trump, we don't really know what he's about. If this is about American lives, maybe you should care about the American lives at home. Maybe you should care about the, now at this point, hundreds of thousands of people who have lost their jobs and will not be able to pay their bills next month. Maybe he should care about the economy, which he is taking a wrecking ball to right now as we're about to go into potentially a recession. He doesn't care about the American people. He cares about his future deals. And frankly, it seems his relationships with foreign adversaries who have shown no love or light towards global democracy or stability.
Well, thank you, Nomiki. Joining me now in the studio is US political strategist Zach Freeman. Zach, we heard some pretty big charges there to President Trump from a Democrat strategist. I mean, what do you make of Trump's big statement today on justice, home affairs? He's shaking up the FBI. He's going after the institutions that, in his eyes, went after him when he was campaigning for the presidency. I mean, is what Trump's saying, is this a fair assessment of the institutions in America?
Yeah, I think President Trump came into office because the American people really lost trust in the institutions of justice, the institution of Congress. There were a lot of people that lost confidence on the fact that maybe they would be accused of something themselves in the future, and that because of maybe their personal beliefs, their political beliefs, their religious beliefs, they might not get a fair treatment. So, despite what you really hear, here in London and across Europe, Americans are generally very comfortable with the changes that have happened in government. This is what they voted for. So President Trump is speaking, what the American public wants to see. Generally, they may not say it publicly, but the American public has been very happy with the reductions in the size of government. They know that that's going to come down on their tax bill. And of course, there's trade-offs to this, but the federal government in the United States has gotten so large that it just wasn't sustainable at that level. So, you hear Donald Trump talking about a lot of things. Maybe he is still trying to prove the points from the campaign, but by and large, he's been delivering for the American people, and they've been very happy about that.
And I think for the first time in decades, I'm right in saying that more Americans think the country's heading in the right direction than the wrong direction. What about this specific issue of Ukraine and the peace deal? I mean, Trump is saying, look, if it was still Joe Biden in the White House, we'd be nowhere near a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. It looks like we're on the cusp of something very significant, potentially evolving into lasting peace. I mean, how do you interpret the latest moves around Ukraine?
Well, I think you have to look at it and say, well, we hope we're moving in the right direction. Right? I think everyone wants an end to this conflict. It isn't, you know, this isn't something that we want to go on for a long period of time. The Biden administration had several years to sort this problem out. You know, and President Trump is right that there wasn't a lot of conflict in the world during his first term, during his first presidency. So I think that, you know, we have to wait and see what happens. Obviously, negotiations are tense. They're detailed. But I think looking at this with an optimistic lens, at least we're talking about peace now.
Yeah.
And you have to just give the process a chance to play out.
But I've said this before, there is something deeper going on philosophically, isn't there, in America with Trumpism, in that, as you heard in that speech just now, you know, this is a conservative movement that is not like the neoliberal conservatives of the 90s and the 2000s, that they are sick of the forever wars. They've watched the disasters in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya. You know, they are clearly about pulling out of these foreign conflicts, trying to save money for American taxpayers, perhaps, you know, putting America a bit more into, dare I say, a sort of splendid isolationism, if you like. I mean, there is something philosophically going on right now in America, isn't there?
There is. You know, you had kind of the way that people thought that the world worked in the United States. You had Gen Z come out in massive numbers for Donald Trump, which no one really anticipated, right?
Young men especially, right?
The complete change in the political dynamic of the United States. You know,
and Hispanic Latinos too, we should add.
Massive changes in every voter demographic, in almost every voter demographic. So, you know, you hear, you know, what we kind of expect to happen, right? This race is neck and neck. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are neck and neck. But in practice, if you went out in any part of the country and you talked to real people, you could sense the philosophical shift that was happening in the country. You could sense that Donald Trump was in a position to be successful. And obviously that result did play out on election night. So this is just, you know, the American public really asserting what they want to happen.
And just lastly, what about this assertion we just heard from the Democrat strategist there, that effectively you have a shadow government operating in the US? You have Elon Musk, you have Doge, you have unelected people advising Donald Trump, although interestingly we never talk about unelected people on the Democrat side. But there is this accusation you hear quite regularly that, look, a lot of the people around the White House, Americans didn't vote for them to be in the White House. They didn't vote for them to have this degree of influence and power. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, there's an entire civil service in government here in the UK that's not elected. There's an entire system of government in the United States that's not elected.
Including also in the European Union, we might add.
You know, this government operates with a lot of people placed in positions of authority. And, you know, by extension, you know, when people are appointed to positions, they're appointed by their elected officials for the reason of accountability, you know. And I think to say that it's an unelected government is only partially true. I mean, every nation and essentially has people that are in appointed roles. And this was not a secret. Donald Trump ran on reducing the size of government. Elon Musk was a very visible part of the campaign. This was forecasted. This was explained in detail before he was elected. So this isn't a surprise. It's what the American people asked for, and now they're getting it.
Well, indeed, I think it was a pretty good indication that Donald Trump was going to be working with Elon Musk based on what we saw during the campaign. Thank you, Zach Freeman, for the expert analysis from a Washington insider. Now, coming up, as the Labour Party appear to be cracking down on the European Convention on Human Rights, the ECHR, we talk about it a lot on this show, is Keir Starmer coming around to the idea that having control of our own borders and courts is a good thing? Or is he just staving off the growing threat from Nigel Farage and the Reform Party? Come back in a couple of minutes.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
Welcome to the Winter Sun Outlook, and if you are looking for some summer-like warmth, the place to be is Greece, where a spring heatwave will bring temperatures widely into the low to mid-20s, perhaps in some spots up to the high 20s, so remarkably warm air drifting out of North Africa, but at the same time, northern parts of Italy, across the Balearics as well, a lot of unsettled weather. Further showers driving into Portugal, a respite into the weekend, but more unsettled weather here next week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here with an exclusive opportunity just for you, our incredible GB News viewers. We're giving you the opportunity to win a VIP studio tour right here at GB News HQ. Plus, you'll also get to meet yours truly. It's easy to enter, just head to gbnews.com/community competition and follow the easy steps. Don't miss out, enter now, and I'll see you soon at GB News. Full T's and C's apply.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back, everybody, to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, right here on GB News. Now, for years, Keir Starmer has built his career on a firm commitment to human rights law. He's repeatedly defended the European Convention on Human Rights, the ECHR, and even as Prime Minister, he's vowed that Britain will never, ever leave the ECHR. But now, with Nigel Farage and Reform UK gaining ground in the polls, averaging 26% of the vote in the latest polls, Keir Starmer's government is showing signs of shifting, maybe, its stance on the ECHR, raising the question, is this a genuine strategic move to counter Reform's appeal, or indeed does Keir Starmer believe what we're reading in the newspapers today? Labour is not proposing to leave the ECHR outright, however, as Reform has called for. But there are clearly signs of internal debate about how the ECHR applies, particularly Article 8, the right to family life. Now, on this show, we've often talked about how that right to a family life has often been used to challenge deportations of foreign criminals and illegal migrants. Some in government suggest that British courts may be interpreting these provisions too rigidly, opening the door for potential tweaks of laws or revised guidance to limit what they call the exploitation of the system. Indeed, just today we learned of yet another case, a shocking case actually, that I also shared on X within Britain's immigration system. Get this, a Pakistani man convicted of sexually assaulting a woman was allowed to remain in the UK after claiming that he was gay, despite providing little evidence to support his claim. Having lived in the country illegally for over a decade, he applied for asylum shortly after his conviction, arguing that deportation would put him at risk were he returned to Pakistan. Another crazy case. The Home Office initially rejected his claims, but due to illegal oversight, the case went unchallenged in court, allowing him to stay, and is now set for a retrial. With over 34,000 cases currently backlogged, many involving similar human rights claims, the government faces mounting pressure to tighten these asylum rules. And the timing is telling. Nigel Farage and Reform have built significant momentum in the polls. They're now ahead of the Conservatives consistently, averaging 26% of the vote, 220,000 party members. Many people out there deeply frustrated with the current direction of immigration and asylum. And obviously, Keir Starmer and Labour are now seeing this shift, including in many Labour heartlands, like that upcoming by-election in Runcorn in northern England. Again, a poll today suggesting Reform is on course to win that by-election. So is Keir Starmer now going to be changing his view on this question of the ECHR? It could, of course, spark a considerable backlash from people within the Labour Party, many of whom will see this as yet more evidence that Keir Starmer is drifting to the right rather than the left. Indeed, Labour's left-wing flank is already uneasy about cuts to welfare, cuts to foreign aid, and further concessions on these human rights laws could deepen those divisions. But some in Keir Starmer's circle may see this as a necessary political calculation, much like how in 2021 Keir Starmer shifted his approach after a poor showing at the Hartlepool by-election. So is Labour genuinely rethinking its position on the ECHR, or is this an attempt to neutralise Reform's growing influence? Well, I'm going to talk about this now with my panel. I also want to know your views, please, at gbnews.com/yoursay, and of course on X at GoodwinMJ. But let's turn to my panel, political commentator Alice Grant and journalist and broadcaster Zoe Grunwald. Zoe, if I may, because you're closer to the Labour Party than I am, there is a sense of frustration on the left of the party with where Labour's been going on foreign aid, where it's been going on welfare, where it's now been going on the NHS. You then read this piece today in The Times by Tom Baldwin, Keir Starmer's biographer, saying, hey, guess what, guys? Keir Starmer might also be about to tweak our membership of the ECHR, particularly parts of the ECHR, in order to clamp down on immigration. How on earth is the Labour Party going to react to this?
Yeah, I think this is going to set alarm bells ringing, because we already saw, as you say, there's been lots of tension over things like welfare spending, things like foreign aid, also just the government's approach to immigration thus far, you know, the deportation videos we saw coming out and discussions about citizenship. So any question on reforming the ECHR, I mean, we saw, you know, in many ways it was one of the big dividing issues of the Conservative Party. So just imagine what it could do to Labour. I don't know. I mean, I don't think that Keir Starmer will flirt with leaving the ECHR, but what I do think is possible is these conversations about particularly the way asylum law is talked about in the UK and it is interpreted. Keir Starmer does have a background as a human rights lawyer. These issues are dear to him. He cares a lot about international order and our international obligations, but I can imagine some questions about, are there tweaks we can do? Are there discussions we have? Is there diplomacy? Whether that will be enough to appease voters is a different question.
Well, I imagine what this is going to end up in is Keir Starmer saying we have to negotiate with our European partners to reform the ECHR, a bit like David Cameron said we need to work with our EU member state partners when we were in the European Union to reform free movement. Of course, he may find that very difficult. But the main worry here, surely, is what's going on in the Labour heartlands with reform, because you've got this by-election in the northeast of England in a Labour-held seat. You've got those massive elections in Wales next year where inevitably Labour are going to come under enormous pressure from Nigel Farage and Reform. Surely this is primarily about fending off Farage rather than actually reflecting Keir Starmer's genuine politics.
I think you're probably right. I mean, I don't think Keir Starmer wants to leave the ECHR. And to be fair, it's not exactly the article you're referring to suggests that Keir Starmer wants that himself, more that the people around Keir Starmer are suggesting that might...
the kind of Lord Glasman, Morgan McSweeney kind of wing, the kind of blue Labour wing.
Precisely. And I think you're right that there is a real worry amongst particularly Labour MPs in those kind of red wall heartlands as well, that they might just be a one-term MP. And so lots of them are concerned about the issue of immigration. It's a big issue for voters, and are worried that the reforms that Labour have put in on things like planning, on things like workers' rights, the economy, just aren't going far enough to convince voters that Labour are doing enough. So I think that is an issue for Keir Starmer.
And Alice Grant, suddenly Keir Starmer looks like he's sort of morphing into a Conservative. And actually, if we want action on the ECHR, if we want action on foreign aid, if we want action on taking on the Quangos and the Blob and a big state, maybe we should look less at Kemi Badenoch and a lot more at Keir Starmer.
What I find interesting is that a lot of these issues are seen to be conservative or right-wing, when actually I think they really just touch upon basic common sense. I mean, trying to manage our NHS and cut waste and, streamline spending is not something that should be seen as radically conservative. It's literally just common sense. So I actually disagree. I don't think this is some ploy to try to, attract the voters who are married to voting to reform. I think this is more just genuinely looking at issues, how to improve our country, as someone would do if they were in power and they wanted to seriously look at how to improve Britain.
So let's roll this out. Let's say Keir Starmer, let's say Tom Baldwin, Keir Starmer's biographer, is right and we are going to see some tweaks to the ECHR. Surely then, however, in all of those Labour heartlands, in all of those Labour areas where Keir Starmer and nervous Labour MPs will be trying to fend off Nigel Farage and Reform, surely Farage and Reform would just say, well, we're not going to tweak the ECHR, we're going to leave the whole thing completely. They're just going to outbid Labour.
Yeah, well, an issue like the ECHR is, in fact, quite a complex issue. So we have incorporated the Human Rights Act, so we've incorporated that into our law.
Well, the Human Rights Act has incorporated the ECHR into domestic law.
Precisely. So it is a difficult issue, really, and I think the big question here is that it does draw on wider concepts of sovereignty and the rule of law, which is something that will, it will take a while to sort of flesh out how we are able to do that if we are, thinking of truly leaving. But we'll see.
Yeah, sorry, Gunvald. I mean, it feels as though the ECHR issue is the next Brexit, that it's the next big debate in British politics, because we cannot, I've said this time and time again on this show, we cannot deport foreign criminals, we cannot stop the small boats, we cannot control our borders until we regain control of our laws and we exit the ECHR and we reform the Human Rights Act.
I think the ECHR is becoming an increasingly salient issue, and part of that is because immigration is becoming an increasingly salient issue. And I think there are politicians who say if we just left the ECHR, that would fix everything. And I think that is a naive perspective. I actually think that leaving the ECHR could present a whole raft of problems for us that go beyond immigration. So, they underpin, for example, the Good Friday Agreement with Northern Ireland. The ECHR also underpins trade agreement. It offers confidence with international trading partners. And it also, arguably, it would call into question our position in the world. We move closer ideologically to the likes of Belarus and Russia, who aren't signatories to the
Canada
ECHR.
and Australia.
Well, but it's the it's the European Convention on Human Rights. So I think there are real questions about it. I don't think Labour are going to want to get into that debate. But what I do think Keir Starmer has, he was an international human rights lawyer. So if anyone can talk knowledgeably about the ECHR...
He reminds me 10 times a day.
Yeah, so if anyone can talk knowledgeably about the ECHR and perhaps any reforms that Labour might want to do, maybe Keir Starmer is the right person for that. Maybe he can make that argument for staying in the ECHR in a convincing way.
Sure, but Alice Grant, fundamentally, until Labour stopped the boats, 155,000 people have entered this country illegally since 2018. And let's be frank, they're not all nice people. A lot of criminals among them. I'm just going to be real with the British people. Until Labour actually stop that crisis and fix our borders, which they can't do so long as we're in the ECHR, this is constantly going to be a thorn in Labour's side, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. But I think also, technically, we can and we should be able to deport them. And if the ECHR want to, hammer us with a big fine, this has happened before. We've been fined. That is the real issue. The real issue is that why on earth are we being told what to do by judges who have nothing to do with this country?
Well, indeed. I think that's a question that millions of people, hard-working, tax-paying, patriotic people out there in the country are asking themselves as well. Thank you to my panel for now. After the break, a new poll shows that Reform UK's so-called civil war between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage has not dented Reform's chances in the upcoming Runcorn and Helsby by-election. Anything could happen, but I'm going to present the numbers to you in a couple of minutes. Stick around.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Lots of fine weather to come as we go into this weekend, but it is still going to be chilly with some frosty nights as well. The reason why we're going to have a lot of fine weather is because high pressure is building from the west, and it's this that's going to help clear away many of the showers that we've seen through recent days. That being said, there will still be a few showers for some of us as we go overnight across some southern southeastern parts, maybe eastern parts of England as well, and also towards the far north of of Scotland, a bit of cloud and some showery rain starting to edge in. Otherwise, a lot of dry weather, some clear skies, allowing temperatures to take a bit of a dip, a bit of a frosty start for some of us, though in the far southeast, a brisk wind will stop temperatures dropping especially low here. And also across the very far north of Scotland, Shetland and later into Orkney, we are going to see a zone of cloud and outbreaks of rain pushing in, so not turning as cold here overnight. But elsewhere across much of Scotland and into Northern Ireland and Northern England, a bright start, but also a frosty one with temperatures sub-zero for many places. Slightly less chilly to start further south, but nonetheless a bit of frost is possible. And do watch out, there could be a few patches of fog or freezing fog in a few spots as well. Otherwise, as we go through tomorrow, and apart from 1 or 2 showers across some parts of England in particular, it's looking largely dry for most of us. Some sunshine breaking through at times as well. Worth noting though, the cloud and outbreaks of rain across the far north of Scotland will edge a bit further southwards. Temperatures for many similar to today, maybe a degree or so higher, so feeling okay in the sunshine, but in the southeast there will be a nagging breeze. After another chilly night for many of us, Saturday into Sunday. Sunday does look like it will get off to a bright start towards the southwest, but cloud towards the north-northeast will eventually make its way southwards across many places, and there will be a few spots of rain mixed in with this as well. As we go through next week, it is going to start chilly, but temperatures should gradually rise as we go through the week. Bye-bye.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
It's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin, on GB News. Now, you won't have missed this story this week, a public dispute between Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe within the Reform Party. Amid that, some journalists and commentators have claimed that Reform is no longer a serious political party and is a failure. But does the latest polling data tell a somewhat different story? Nationally, Reform UK is now averaging close to 26% in the national polls. That's 12 points higher than what the party polled at the general election only a few months ago. It's got 220,000 members, about 100,000 more than the Conservative Party. Polling also suggests that Reform is now leading in the upcoming by-election in Runcorn and Helsby, which of course was called after the Labour MP physically assaulted one of his own voters. Lord Ashcroft's poll came out this morning, which you can see on your screen, suggesting that Reform is heading for victory in that northern Labour-held seat. So, was this just a Westminster bubble story all along? Joining me now is former Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Ben Habib. Ben, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us this evening. Now, as I just said, Reform averaging 26% of the national vote, 220,000 members, 100,000 more than the Tories, on course to win a parliamentary by-election. You've written today in the Telegraph that Nigel Farage is incapable of building the sort of breadth and depth of high-calibre people required to form a transformational government. So if this is failure, Ben, what does success look like to you?
So you have to distinguish, Matt, between polling well and being popular and actually being able to deliver for the country. And they're two completely different things. Nigel Farage is a fantastic campaigner. He's fantastic at banging the drum, a bit like Boris Johnson. And you might recall Boris Johnson got an 80-seat majority. He did fantastically well in that general election, and then he absolutely let the country down. He did not deliver Brexit as he promised he would, locked us up. The economy emerged in deep, deep damage. And Nigel Farage, I'm afraid, is of the same cloth. So he's a fantastic campaigner, is doing terrifically well in the polls, but that isn't the key issue for me. The key issue for me, and frankly, anyone else in this country who cares about this country, is whether or not reform is capable of delivering the country away from the precipice on which we now stand. And we stand on the precipice of constitutional, economic, cultural disaster. And Nigel Farage, well, you asked me a question, Matt, so let me, if I may just finish. And Nigel Farage, on all those key issues, at least the way reform is structured at the moment, will not be able to deliver for the country. So it's academic for me.
You don't know that. Let me just put something to you, if I may.
Matt, I absolutely know that. And what you must not do, Matt, is conflate popularity with effectiveness.
So
they're not
Ben,
the same thing.
A question I have, lots of people online saying that reform is not radical enough, it's too soft, it's moved to the centre. This is a party that is campaigning in its manifesto to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, for an immediate freeze on all future immigration, for an end to health tourism, for an end to migrants having immediate access to the welfare state. I mean, if this is not radical, if this is not a challenge to the political establishment in this country, then where do you want to go?
So, just to be clear, for me, it is about having the right structures in the party so that you can attract the high caliber of people that you will need in order to make the policies that are required to save the country, be able to draft the legislation. Let me finish, Matt. It's very important. Draft the legislation to allow any incoming pro-British government to deliver the policies that they wish to deliver, hit the road running a bit like Donald Trump did when he came into office, and for the country, therefore, to be saved. Now, the problem with Nigel Farage and reform is that Nigel Farage is reform and reform is Nigel Farage. And there is no structure. They say they've democratized the party. They say that they've got checks and balances in place. They haven't. I've looked at the detail. We can go through it if you want to, but they haven't done it. And what's happened to Rupert Lowe was an accident waiting to happen. Anyone with an independent form of thinking, anyone who's going to criticize or question the direction of travel which Nigel Farage wished to go in, was going to be set aside. And that means that you will not get... That means you will not get the great minds, the fearless thinkers coming to join reform, the kinds of people that we need in reform to save this country.
If I may,
that's my issue.
You were deputy leader of reform. I understand that when you were deputy leader, the party had around 60,000 members. I know you've been quite critical of Zia Youssef, the chairman of the party currently. Under Zia Youssef, the party now has 220,000 members. So he's doing something right, isn't he?
So let's just get something straight. The grassroots of reform are in turmoil. If you want to win elections, let's just get down to brass tacks, because that's where you want to go. If you want to win elections, you have to have grassroots. In the last 6 months, Zia Youssef has set aside dozens and dozens and dozens of former grassroots members of reform, people with whom I have campaigned shoulder to shoulder in various elections where
They've got 400 branches now, haven't they?
Or other people have been... You're not following the detail. Listen to what I have to say.
I've been speaking at reform branches over the last 3 months, so I'm pretty familiar with what's going on in the grassroots. This is a party that was only 2 years old, and it's averaging 26% of the vote, Ben.
So you keep going back to the polls. You keep confusing and conflating popularity with the ability to deliver for the country.
I'm just trying to figure out what it is that you want, Ben, apart from a change of structure, because you've said today that you want a new party headed by Rupert Lowe.
I want to change the structure. I want a party which is capable of tolerating other people beyond Nigel. Nigel, frankly, is such a big character, such a big campaigner, that the party desperately needs checks and balances in place on the leadership, so that other people who
Nigel's also the only non-establishment politician in this country. He's won 2 nationwide elections with 2 different parties. I'm just being real with you. I look at his critics and they've not won anything.
Matt,
and this is a guy who's won 2 national elections.
Matt, it's not a matter of just winning an election. You've got to be able to deliver for the country when you win the election. And reform is not capable of doing that the way it is structured. The fact
you change countries by winning elections. You change policies by winning elections. That's how you do it.
You keep interrupting. There's no point winning an election if the policies you have are pointless and the individuals that you've got are substandard and incapable of delivering it.
Leaving the ECHR is not a pointless policy, Ben.
Do you know what the last pronunciation of Nigel Farage on the ECHR was? Do you know what it was, Matt? It wasn't to leave the ECHR. It was to have a referendum on the ECHR. That is where Nigel's mind is on the ECHR. Nigel wants a referendum. The last thing we need is a referendum on the ECHR.
Well, this debate is going to continue, Ben. This debate is going to continue. I'm sorry, we've run out of time. That's State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. What a debate. It's going to carry on online, I'm sure. I will see you next week. It's Matt Goodwin. This has been State of the Nation on GB News. Bye-bye.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Lots of fine weather to come as we go into this weekend, but it is still going to be chilly with some frosty nights as well. The reason why we're going to have a lot of fine weather is because high pressure is building from the west, and it's this that's going to help clear away many of the showers that we've seen through recent days. That being said, there will still be a few showers for some of us as we go overnight across some southern southeastern parts, maybe eastern parts of England as well, and also towards the far north of Scotland, a bit of cloud and some showery rain starting to edge in. Otherwise, a lot of dry weather, some clear skies, allowing temperatures to take a bit of a dip, a bit of a frosty start for some of us, though in the far southeast, a brisk wind will stop temperatures dropping especially low here. And also across the very far north of Scotland, Shetland and later into Orkney, we are going to see a zone of cloud and outbreaks of rain pushing in, so not turning as cold here overnight. But elsewhere across much of Scotland and into Northern Ireland and Northern England, a bright start, but also a frosty one with temperatures sub-zero for many places. Slightly less chilly to start further south, but none